I was gone for maybe 40 minutes, just a quick run to the hardware store. When I pulled back into my driveway, the first thing I noticed was the front door wasn't closed all the way. It was cracked open just a couple inches. That alone felt weird. I knew I'd shut it when I left. Then I heard voices inside my house. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten someone was coming by. But as I stepped closer, I could hear two people talking about property compliance and documenting violations. That's when it hit me. These weren't friends. They were HOA staff standing in my living room, looking around like they owned the place. And the craziest part? I'm not even in their HOA, which meant the next conversation we had was going to get real uncomfortable. Real fast. The weird thing is, my neighborhood doesn't even have an HOA, at least not the part of it where my house sits. The development next door does. Same builder, same style houses, same entrance road. But about halfway down the street, the HOA boundary stops. My place sits just outside it. That was actually one of the reasons I bought the house in the first place. No dues, no architectural committee, no letters about what color my mailbox should be. When I closed on the house, the title paperwork made it clear. The property wasn't part of the association. The previous owner had even mentioned it casually during the walkthrough. You get the neighborhood without the HOA headaches. And for the first year, that's exactly how it worked. The HOA board ran the neighborhood behind us. Their pool, their clubhouse, their rules. But they never bothered anyone on our side of the street. We waved to each other, borrowed tools once in a while. Normal neighbor stuff. Then Brenda Kensington, a new HOA president, took over. Within a few weeks, people started hearing about stricter enforcement inside the association. Parking rules, yard standards, fence approvals, the usual HOA things. Still, none of that applied to me. Or at least it wasn't supposed to. A couple months before the day I found strangers in my living room, I started getting letters in my mailbox, HOA notices. At first, I assumed it was just a mistake. The envelopes had the HOA logo on them and were addressed to my house number. But the language talked about member compliance and community guidelines. I emailed the management company. They wrote back saying they would look into the address. Then the letter stopped. So I figured the mix-up had been fixed, which is why the last thing I expected when I came home that afternoon was to find two HOA staff members walking around inside my house like they were doing an inspection. Because whatever confusion they had about the address before, it's time they had crossed a line that wasn't even close to their jurisdiction. When I pushed the door open the rest of the way, both of them turned and looked at me like I was the one interrupting something. One guy had a tablet in his hand. The other was holding a clipboard. They were standing right in my living room, looking around and taking pictures inside my house. For a second, I just stood there trying to process what I was seeing. Then I asked the obvious question, "What are you doing in my house?" The guy with the tablet said they were with the HOA and they were conducting a compliance inspection. Like that sentence explained everything. I told them my place wasn't in the HOA. He shook his head and said the property had been flagged for unapproved exterior modifications, and they were documenting the interior condition as well. Interior condition. That's when my patience started wearing thin. I asked how they even got inside. The other guy said the front door had been unlocked when they arrived, and that they had authorization from the association to inspect the property. Authorization from the association. I told them that didn't mean anything here. This house isn't in their neighborhood. I don't pay their dues. I'm not under their rules. And even if I was, nobody gets to walk into someone's house just because they feel like it. The two of them started looking a lot less confident once that sank in. The guy with the tablet said Brenda Kensington had given them the address personally and told them the property was part of the community, so now it was starting to make sense. Those letters a few months back. The address review email. Apparently, nobody had actually fixed the mistake. Instead, someone had decided to double down on it. I told them they needed to leave right now. They didn't argue, but they didn't exactly rush either. The clipboard guy said they still needed to finish documenting a few things outside. I told him that wasn't happening either, because, at that point, this wasn't an HOA misunderstanding anymore. It was two strangers walking through my house and taking pictures without permission. And that's the kind of situation where you stop debating policies and start making phone calls. So I stepped outside, pulled out my phone, and called the local sheriff's office, not to cause a scene, just to make it very clear where the authority actually stopped. Because if Brenda Kensington thought she had power over my property before, she was about to learn exactly how far that power didn't reach. The sheriff's deputy showed up about 10 minutes later. By that time, the two HOA staff guys were standing out by the driveway, talking quietly next to their truck. You could tell they were getting uneasy. What probably sounded like a routine inspection an hour earlier suddenly didn't look so routine anymore. The deputy stepped out of his cruiser and asked what was going on. I explained the situation from the beginning. I told him I'd come home to find two people inside my house, taking pictures and claiming they had authority from the HOA to inspect the property. I also told him the key detail that made the whole thing ridiculous. My house isn't even in their HOA. The deputy walked over and talked to the two guys for a minute. One of them handed over the work order from their tablet. It listed my address and referenced an HOA compliance inspection authorized by the association president. The deputy read it, looked at the address again, and then asked them a simple question. Did the homeowner give you permission to enter the house? They both shook their heads. One of them tried explaining that Brenda had said the property was part of the association and that they had the right to inspect violations. The deputy didn't even argue with them. He just said, HOA rules don't override private property law. Then he pointed at my house. That's his home. You don't walk into it without permission. You could see the realization hit them all at once. This wasn't an HOA matter anymore. It was trespassing. The deputy asked them to step away from the property while he made a quick call to verify the parcel records. A few minutes later, he came back and confirmed exactly what I'd been saying the whole time. My property sits outside the HOA boundary, always has. The address had been listed incorrectly in their internal records, which meant Brenda had sent them to inspect a house that the association had absolutely no authority over. At that point, the deputy told them very clearly that they needed to leave the property immediately. If there were any further disputes about ownership or boundaries, that was something the HOA could handle through proper legal channels. But walking into someone's home because you think HOA rules apply, that doesn't fly. The two guys packed up their things pretty quickly after that. No more pictures, no more notes. Just an awkward apology about following instructions. And before they drove off, the deputy added one last thing. If the association contacts you again about inspections, they should probably double-check their maps first. Because the authority they thought they had that afternoon never existed in the first place. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the HOA management company. Subject line, address correction notice. Apparently, after the sheriff confirmed the property records, someone at the association finally checked the county parcel map themselves. It took them about 5 minutes to figure out what I had been saying the entire time. My house had never been part of their HOA, not when it was built, not when I bought it, not ever. The address had just been mistakenly added to their internal list of homes when the neighborhood expanded years earlier, which meant every letter they had sent me, every violation notice, and that whole inspection attempt the day before had all been based on a mistake that somehow lasted months. The email said they were removing the property from their records immediately and apologized for any inconvenience caused by the misunderstanding. Inconvenience? That was a pretty generous way of describing two strangers walking around inside someone's house. But at least the situation was finally settled. A couple days later, I ran into one of the neighbors who actually lives inside the HOA. He told me the board meeting that week had been tense. Apparently, the sheriff's visit had made its way back to Brenda Kensington pretty quickly. Turns out when you send staff to inspect a property that isn't even under your authority and it ends with a law enforcement conversation, people tend to ask questions, lots of questions. From what I heard, the association quietly updated their property list, clarified the neighborhood boundary, and made it very clear that future inspections would require confirmed addresses first, which honestly seemed like common sense to begin with. As for my house, the letter stopped completely. No more compliance notices, no more inspections, no more confusion about who actually had authority over the property. And the whole situation ended up being a pretty simple reminder: HOAs have rules, but those rules only apply to the people who actually belong to them. Because the moment they try to enforce those rules outside their own neighborhood, they're not running an HOA anymore, they're just trespassing.